No.
All right, we'll go ahead and call ourselves back from recess. Kate McMahon, Jeff Keys, Robert Petchin Associates, J-Luce Implementation Phase Decision.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
The floor is mine. Okay, well, that's great. So, my name is Jeff Key, and I'm a transportation planner. And we're here today to visit about the Fort Harrison Limestone Hills training area implementation project that we have just begun. And you're our first outreach. We have quite a bit of activity scheduled over the next couple days with various elected officials and advisory groups. And so between this area and Helena, we'll be going back and forth to really more than anything to get the word out and start building momentum. We're at the very beginning of this, and Kate McMahon over here is my associate, and so I have just a very brief slide show for you all. Okay, and I hope that this project isn't new to you. I want to start off by saying there has been quite a bit of work done so far on what we call the Joint Land Use Study. Joint Land Use Study is a type of planning study that you see around military installations and training facilities. It really looks at the compatibility issues that exist between communities and the military. The Joint Land Use Study that's been completed here, I think it got wrapped up in December of 2014. It was approximately an 18-month study. And I know that there was representation on the committees, the various committees. There was a technical committee and a steering committee, and I believe Broadwater County had representation, and Townsend, et cetera. But what came out of that study was there's basically compatibility issues and factors that are examined. And from this study, there came on the order of 100+ recommendations to try to manage and mitigate issues that might happen between military and the communities. So Lewis and Clark County and the Department of Defense decided to go one step further and try to implement many of these things that were in this pretty robust effort. And so that's where we came on board, is that this study had lots and lots of compatibility things. Some of the issues that were in the study are better left for the military to try to deal with. Some of them are local communities, some of them are other parties. But at the end of the day, there's a range of compatibility factors that were identified as being items of interest, and so that's where we're involved. So we'll talk about that. That's how this came down to be kind of an implementation project. Oftentimes in plans we see a disconnect between planning and implementation. We can plan till we're blue in the face, but actually implementing what's in there is kind of the trick. And so that's really the effort right here. So these are kind of some of the things that happened during the J-Luce implementation. There was a lot of collaboration and a lot of kind of coordination between different bodies, including Broadwater County, the military, Lewis and Clark County, etc. Basically, the study area in the joint land use, it included land within and adjacent to active military installations. And so that includes Fort Harrison up in Helena, but also the Limestone Hills training area, around your neck of the woods. And like I said, we tried to identify compatible land uses and growth management guidelines, and then this funding came from the Department of Defense and Lewis and Clark County. So this is a slide that I like to, hit home right off the bat, is that the National Guard in Montana spends on the order of $200 million a year via payroll, lodging, meals, operations, and maintenance. And I think, from the economic benefit point of view, our military generates a lot of good things for our communities, and I'm sure, I didn't have the exact numbers here in Townsend. I do have some handouts I'll leave you with, but I'm sure that you experience the impact of the military through meals and gas and things like that. And so this second bullet is very interesting to me too. This was kind of a shocker. This area is one of 4 training centers in 11 northwestern states that has special training opportunities. I think there's one in Boise, Idaho, there's one in Wyoming, there's another one somewhere else. And so, having these 4 training centers and having one so conveniently located in Broadwater County, Lewis and Clark County, that's a big thing. And of course the military wants to sustain that training mission. And I'm sure the communities want to realize the benefits of those training missions as well. So, that's really good information. Those are good things to know. I talked about compatibility factors. Well, the Joint Land Use Study looked at these 23 different items, and of those items, 18 of them were flagged as being things that we should be paying attention to and maybe working towards some sort of remedy or mitigation. And you can kind of see the list. This very first one, it seems harmless enough, interagency coordination and communication. But there's a very, very strong desire by all parties to kind of elevate this communication that we're having. And that's the reason we're here right now. We don't have any recommendations for you today. We don't have any decisions that need to be made, but it's really just kind of an effort to heighten this coordination. And so I think that's often goes underappreciated. It's just that the military has a huge impact on our communities. The communities have a huge impact on our military, and we need to do a much better job of that. And then these other things are things that you could probably envision. Just land use features in and around the military installations. The military has certain requirements around their facilities to enhance their training. Your residents have certain expectations around the facilities for quality of life issues. Oftentimes these things kind of butt up against each other, and so we're trying to figure out how do you manage that and how do you mitigate some of those things. Safety for all parties, vertical obstructions, those could refer to heights of towers, cell towers, transmission towers, things like that. Might seem benign enough, but the military has, they have training exercises that they do that they rely on unobstructed airspace and things like that. So I won't read every single one of these, but you can kind of see. If you were to look at that joint land use study, a very robust study, which is on our website, by the way, you will see for each one of these bullets, you'll actually see what those issues are and what some of the concerns are. Even in your area, I look at this, I know noise was brought to people's attention. There is a variety of noise impacts with the training at Limestone Hills. Dust, smoke, and steam. There's been comments about dust control on some of the public roadways, and just some of these other items. So this is very important. These are the things that we're trying to understand and mitigate. Now, one of the things that came out of the joint land use study, and I hope this isn't totally brand new to everybody, but we have something called a military affected area. Those are called MAAs, and all these little different lines in here, they represent a certain type of military use, a military affected area. This red line, and this is Fort Harrison outside of Helen, I'll use this as the example, but the red line refers to a noise military affected area. So we're able to kind of quantify where noise impacts may be larger than not. We also have a safety MAA. This is where helicopter landing and departure activities occur. We have an imaginary surface MAA. If you could imagine a plane or a helicopter taking off and landing, there's certain clearance, and as you get farther away from a runway or a pad, that distance gets bigger and bigger, and so we call those imaginary surfaces. So the bottom line is that collectively we've identified through the previous study different MAAs, and when you lay all of those things on top of each other, then you have what's known as an affected area overlay district. And one of the things that we're exploring is not only for Fort Harrison, but here for Limestone Hills, is with these different MAAs, is there an opportunity to have more, teeth into an affected area overlay district through your growth policies or through some other matter? And Kate will talk about that at a certain slide. But in Limestone Hills, you have a variety of training activities. This red line is, just like Fort Harrison, it's a noise military affected area. This is for small arms. This is for many of the small weapons training that you would hear occasionally. That's different than some of the more larger noises that you hear that might be more magnified by weather. And there was quite a bit of analysis in the joint land use study about the impacts of weather and wind and things like that and how that affects noise. We also have land, which is kind of this blue area. This is a 1 mile buffer around the training area. Really there needs to probably be a higher recognition that land uses adjacent to the training area might experience some certain things. I know there was a lot of public comment. I shouldn't say a lot, but there was public comment when this was developed, back in 2014 about low-flying aircraft, impact to agricultural operations and livestock, et cetera. And so all those things have been studied and documented. We're really, well, what can you do about that to help mitigate that a little bit? And then we have this flight path, which is what these green lines are. Generally, the military overflight area tries to stay, pretty much along the highway corridor. They do deviate occasionally for some of their training, but collectively, all three of these things are items that were identified in the previous study, and so we're exploring what does that mean and how can we mold this, if at all possible, into what we would call this overlay district. Now, the implementation part, which is what we're involved with, that joint land use study has already been done, it's already been completed. The implementation are these items that we're trying to accomplish with the work we're doing. We're actually trying to heighten coordination, I've already mentioned that. We're trying to look at your land use policies of every entity that's affected by this and seeing if there's an opportunity to strengthen language either in your growth policy or some other way of heightening awareness of these matters. Certainly you can envision circumstances where somebody might build a home or buy a home and then find out that it's actually a little noisier than I thought, because of helicopters or this or that. So we're looking at all of your regulatory documents to see if there's a way that we can heighten awareness and in some cases, create this overlay district so people know and we know kind of what the cause and effect of these things are. We also are looking at open space buffers. There's a program called the Army Compatible Use Buffer Program, which actually has money available to set aside buffers between military installations in the communities, or maybe delineate the type of use that you would have on a vacant parcel of land that would help. It's a competitive program. You have to compete with other states and other installations, but Fort Harrison has been successful, which I'll show you in a second. And then just some of these other things. There is a Compatibility Act that was passed in the Montana State Legislature that basically allows factoring in this military affected area districts, these overlay districts, allows you to do that within a growth policy framework. And so those two things kind of go hand in hand. And so that's fairly interesting as well. And then just kind of getting the word out with some outreach in public and lighting standards and dark skies ordinances. Really, we don't force these issues on local jurisdictions. We're not here to force these issues or, language or regulations. But we do want to explore it with you and see, where that might take us. We can't force you to modify a growth policy. We can't, and we don't want to. We want to collaborate. So we're going to post some ideas over the next, 6 to 9 months and see how you folks respond to it. The commissions, the planning boards, the cities, etc., and see where that takes us. And so that's pretty interesting. We are doing a big focus on Country Club Road outside of Helena. I don't know if you've ever been on that road, but that's the road that goes directly to Fort Harrison. And so we're doing some focus areas on that roadway as well. So this is kind of our steering committee. Nicole from Broadwater County, obviously she sits on our committee. We have City of Helena representatives, Lewis and Clark representatives, Deborah LaFontaine here from the Department of Military Affairs, and Laura Erickson from Lewis and Clark County. We meet on a monthly basis and we are generally starting to review deliverables and potential language of some things, and really just as kind of a steering committee to help us out. So Kate, why don't you speak a little bit about growth policies?
My name is Kate McMahon, and I'm a planning consultant, and I'm the applied communications that's on the firm. I've worked a lot around the state on various growth policies, so one of the reasons I'm on the team is to work with the different jurisdictions to take a look at their growth policies and see where they might be able to amend them or add language that could address some of the concerns in the JLUs. You actually have a really good example just in Cascade County of how a county or a city might amend their growth policies. Cascade County did a joint land use study from Malmstrom Air Force Base, and then subsequently went back and amended their growth policies, and Great Falls did the same thing. So we sort of look to them, as a good example. They're right here in Montana. They're just 90 miles away. The things that they did in those jurisdictions, we looked at what Cascade County did and then went through all the various growth policies that were affected by this JLUs to see where they were at, how old they were, if they were going to be amended pretty soon, and what they might be able to do. In Cascade County, again, using that as an example, they added maps to show where that military affected area was, because growth policies really do a couple things. And one of the things is just alert the public to what the issues are in the community. So having those maps, like Jeff said, somebody who's looking to build a home or something might look at the growth policy and say, well, what does the county have in mind? What's going on in this, area here? And they can see the map and it alerts them that there is a training center there and these are some of the impacts. So it does really help get the word out in the community. Other things that the growth policy does is it, as you know, lays the foundation for any subdivision. You check your growth policies and make sure there's consistency between what you're doing and what's in the growth policy. If the county is interested in adopting any land use regulations, maybe under the military affected area, again, you would look at the growth policy and see if there's a foundation in that. And so you usually do lay that growth policy through your goals and objectives and saying, here's what we want to accomplish, compatibility between the limestone hills and surrounding land uses, and might list some activities that you would do to do that. So having that in your growth policy then, and then subsequently going and making amendments to your subdivision ordinance, or maybe adopting regulations through the MCA, military affected area regulations, you want to have that first in your growth policy. For Broadwater County, the planning board is looking at the growth policy now, so you're sort of in a good position to actually incorporate some changes into your growth policy because you're in that process. City of Townsend just adopted their growth policy last year, so we might, they might not be looking at doing anything for another 5 years or whatever, but Broadwater County is actually in the process of amending your growth policies now. So we wanted to get this out here. I think that this slide shows sort of the summaries. It was just a sample slide we went through, looked at all the growth policies, did a table and summarized them. So this has got Helena and Lewis and Clark, but we haven't, the table does also include Broadwater County and Townsend too, so we're going to be working with you as well. So that's sort of, where we're at, and like I say, we'll be meeting with the planning board tomorrow to sort of talk about where they're at in the process.
So a couple other things then, before I conclude, is that I mentioned this program here, the ACUB program. This was in the newspaper, I guess maybe it was in February or March, I don't know the exact date, but this is an example of a program and how it might benefit both the community and the military installation. This is Prickly Pear Land Trust released or announced ownership of two very large parcels right outside Fort Harrison that were very meaningful parcels to them and also to the Fort Harrison installation. It basically eliminates high density subdivision ever occurring on that parcel right across from the gate. And so the ACUB program, again, it's a federal program that you have to compete for, and Deborah walked in and this was a very significant announcement because 2 of 3 very large parcels across from Fort Harrison will never see high density urban type development right across the gate from the fort. And so there are some opportunities out there that Deborah and her staff has been exploring that we're going to continue to explore. Transportation, I mentioned briefly the country club. This has some parallels to Limestone Hills because I do remember the public comments that have been documented in the joint land use study about concerns over River Road and concerns over the main public road through the facility. We're doing a very detailed look on Country Club Avenue. This roadway has been degrading for 30 years and it's not getting any better. And so there's some potential that we may be able to improve that by showing this nexus of heavy military vehicles and the impact. So we're doing some work there, but again, depending on how the flavor of this implementation project goes, we might find ourselves dealing with maintenance or dust control or some other things regarding, just right outside your community right here. So I have driven through Limestone Hills. I have a little bit of a flavor for what's going on out there. And certainly I look at all the public comment that was generated, 2 to 3 years ago, because those are a matter of record. Those are in the appendices. We do have a very nice website that we are starting to populate. All you have to do is type in fortharrisonjluce.com, and there's quite a bit of information. But basically, as we generate ideas and deliverables, we post them up here on this little resources tab. we have a whole bunch of studies that are already posted out there that were derived during the actual, the original J-Luz project. And it's some interesting reading. I mean, there's a lot of good work that went into that planning study. And again, oftentimes there's a disconnect from planning to getting it done on the ground. So we've chipped away at a few of these things and we're trying to get them done. And I think that's the exciting part. I'm going to hand out these marketing sheets. Maybe that's not the right word, but I just want people to understand, you know, as we go forward, we want to point out some things that are going on. You know, this first one is just kind of an economic value that I spoke to a little bit about how important the National Guard is in Montana. I have a few little tidbits about Limestone Hills and Fort Harrison and kind of, you know, what their training characteristics are. And then another one I wanted to showcase was just some of the youth programs that the National Guard does in Montana. There's some great youth programs for at-risk youth that really contribute a lot to, you know, this overall area. And then lastly, just schedule. You know, we kind of really got going pretty hard here in February, March, and April. And so this is, like I said, our first dialogue. We've got a lot of activities to do over the next 6 to 9 months to try to implement these things. Part of implementing a planning project is sometimes it takes on a life of its own. It's not like you're going out and designing a roadway for 2 blocks. We're trying to be collaborative and responsive, and we're trying to see where all this is going to take us. But at the end of the day, you know, we do have a finite time. We're trying to get down to, you know, early spring of next year. So we will be back to visit with you as we maintain this schedule. So I guess in conclusion, and I don't know how long I took here, our intent was to just expose you to this, that it's going on, to let you know that if you haven't heard anything about that original, you know, this original joint land use study, which, you know, took about 18 months to do, it's because we're been getting geared up to get to this step, which is doing something about it. You know? So I think it's pretty exciting. Laura is the grant manager with Lewis and Clark County. She's kind of my equivalent, and of course I'm the project manager. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I hope it was somewhat informative and not totally brand new to you. So thanks for your attention.
Oh, thank you very much. Any questions for Jeff from the commission? Anyone from the public have any questions? I see no hands. Well, this has been a good project, and it's been nice to be able to work again with Lewis and Clark County. So yeah, it's been good. It also brought people together to start talking about some common issues, and that's never a bad thing.
Good. Well, we'll be back to see you, and we will leave a stack of these for both yourselves and anyone in the public, and it has our website address as we keep going. Thank you. So, thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, nice seeing you.
Last chance for questions, anyone?
It's not the last chance, not on until March.
Last chance for now.
For now.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is there anything else for the good of the order?
Not for me.
All right, any last comments from the public? All right, oh, Bill?
Am I on the agenda for next week?
Yes, yes, that's what we agreed to in the
I
letter.
didn't know what all happened, this, there was never a time frame on the letter, just wanted to, and then everything went, so,
All right,
thanks.
yeah, you bet. All right, with that, we are adjourned at 12:03.
Thank you, thank you.